Power didn't save him. Money didn't save him. His title didn't save him. One badge, one decision. And suddenly a black man in a $5,000 suit was slammed against a police cruiser, treated like he didn't belong in the city he ran. This wasn't a mistake. This was the system working exactly as designed. Mayor Elijah. Carter felt the cold metal bite his ribs before the crowd even understood. What they were seeing, before the phones came up, before the excuses were invented. The siren screamed judgment, red and blue cutting across his reflection in the cruiser window. And in that reflection, he saw what the badge saw first. Not an elected official, not a reformer, not a man late for a meeting with the governor, but a body to be controlled. He kept his voice level because that's what survival teaches you. "Officer, why am I being detained?" The answer came back with a smirk, the kind that enjoys the imbalance. "Don't play smart with me. You people always think. Rules don't apply." Elijah swallowed the instinct to correct him, the instinct to say the city's rules bore his signature. Because experience whispered the truth. Clarity doesn't calm power. It challenges it. 10 minutes earlier, Elijah had been walking fast along Cedar Avenue, the marble dome of City Hall gleaming ahead like a promise he'd already paid for. His Audi sat 2 blocks back with hazard lights blinking an apology, engine dead at the worst possible moment. He'd texted his chief of staff to stall, adjusted his cufflinks, and rehearsed figures in his head, bond timelines, contractor audits. A fragile coalition that would evaporate if the governor lost patience. He didn't notice the patrol car idling at the intersection until the lights snapped on. Officer Grant. Hollis had transferred in 3 weeks ago from a county that treated cities like war zones and taught recruits to read danger into confidence. From behind the wheel, Grant clocked the details the way training and prejudice had taught him to do. Expensive suit, leather briefcase, purposeful stride. A black man who looked like he belonged everywhere. In Grant's mind, that didn't add up. He radioed in a field interview, flipped the lights, and stepped out with his hand hovering near the holster, posture loud with authority. "Where are you headed in such a hurry?" Grant asked. "To work," Elijah replied, gesturing toward City Hall. "My car broke down." Grant's eyes narrowed, scanning for the crime that would justify the stop already happening. ID. Elijah's brow furrowed, not in fear but in principle. "May I ask why I'm being stopped?" The air shifted. "Don't question me," Grant snapped. "High crime area." Elijah glanced at the manicured lawns and security, cameras of government buildings. "Officer, I have the right to know." That was enough. Grant stepped in close, voice dropping to a threat disguised as procedure. "Hands on the car." Backup crackled over the radio. A red light blinked on the body camera, a silent witness that would later tell a story no one in control expected. The cuffs came on tight, too tight, pinching skin, biting metal into bone. Elijah's wedding band caught the light. His watch dug painfully into his wrist as Grant cinched the ratchet another notch. "Is this necessary?" Elijah asked, steady despite the humiliation. "That's for me to decide," Grant said, patting him down with a roughness that crossed from search into statement. He pulled Elijah's phone, silenced an incoming call, governor's office, and held it like a trophy. "Nice phone. Nice watch. How do you afford this?" The question wasn't curiosity. It was accusation. Elijah stared ahead, breathing slow, cataloging details the way his own police training manuals advised civilians to do. Name tag, badge number, the camera angle, the words being used. He chose restraint, not because he lacked power, but because he understood it. The system exposed itself best when allowed to run. A small crowd formed. Phones rose. A woman in a postal uniform stepped closer, concern on her face. "Is everything okay?" Grant's hand slid to his holster. "Ma'am, step back." Elijah spoke calmly, loudly enough to be recorded. "Please keep filming, but stay safe." Grant didn't like that. He announced charges the way a menu lists options: obstruction, disorderly conduct, possession of a concealed weapon, gesturing to a small letter opener pulled from Elijah's wallet as if it were a revelation. "That's not a weapon," Elijah said. "It's not concealed." Grant ignored him, counting the cash in the wallet instead, narrating suspicion into existence. $300? Explain that. It's legal to carry cash. It is when it's not suspicious, Grant replied, satisfied with the logic that made him right. Another patrol car arrived. Officer Mateo Rivera stepped out, eyes flicking between the cuffs, the crowd, the body camera. What's the situation? Non-compliant subject, Grant said quickly. Possibly fake ID. Rivera studied Elijah's calm, the cut of the suit, the way the crowd leaned in. Has he been processed? Grant said they were transporting him now. Elijah caught the eye of a City Hall intern in the crowd, recognized the fear and the resolve. Please call City Hall extension 0001, he said softly. Tell them the mayor needs assistance. The intern's eyes widened. She nodded and moved. Dispatch crackled. Hold position. The police chief was en route. Grant froze, then bristled. What the hell? He muttered, reaching for the cruiser door. Rivera shifted, loosening the cuffs a fraction when Grant wasn't looking. Sir, Rivera whispered, something's not right. Elijah nodded, gratitude measured. Grant demanded to know who Elijah thought he was. Elijah asked again for the charge. The radio repeated the order. Hold position. Grant turned the volume down. Sweat beaded at his temples as the crowd doubled, live streams ticking upward. You set this up, he accused. Some kind of ambush. The accusation betrayed fear. Rivera stepped between them. Grant shoved him aside, hard enough to make the crowd gasp. Cameras caught everything. Black SUVs screamed to a stop, blocking exits with intent. The police chief's sedan angled across the lane. Suits and uniforms spilled out, faces stern. The radio cut through the noise. All units, stand down. The chief approached, eyes taking in the scene. Cuffs too tight. A composed man absorbing humiliation. A patrol officer talking himself into a corner. Grant straightened, voice rehearsed. Situation under control. Suspicious behavior. He held up the wallet, thumb covering the seal that would have ended this hours ago. Rivera edged away, choosing his future. The governor's security formed a perimeter. Silence fell heavy as the chief asked the question that cracked the moment open. Officer Hollis, do you know who you have in handcuffs? Elijah stood still, the center of a storm he didn't create, breathing through the pain in his wrists, letting the record build. He had a decision to make, and he made it with clarity. He would not short-circuit the truth to save a man who had already decided who he was. He would let the system speak. The question hung in the air like a held breath. Do you know who you have in handcuffs? Officer Grant Hollis didn't answer right away, not because he was thinking carefully, but because the ground beneath his certainty had begun to shift. His eyes flicked from the police chief to the black SUVs, to the growing wall of phones and faces, and finally back to the man still pressed against the cruiser. For the first time since he'd turned on his lights, Grant really looked at Elijah Carter, not as a collection of assumptions, but as a presence that refused to shrink. Sir, Grant began, forcing a thin smile, there's been a misunderstanding. He reached for the cuffs, instinctively trying to erase the evidence before it solidified into consequence. Please don't remove evidence from the scene, officer, Elijah said calmly, his voice clear enough for every microphone to capture. Grant's hand froze mid-air. The police chief's jaw tightened, a flicker of something like relief crossing his face. Relief that the truth would now be preserved exactly as it stood. He turned to Officer Rivera. Document everything. Secure all body camera footage immediately. Nothing gets altered. Rivera nodded, gratitude and dread mixing in his expression. He knew which side of history he'd chosen and how close he'd come to choosing wrong. The city attorney stepped forward, tablet already glowing with notes. Mr. Carter, with your permission, I'd like to take your statement while the scene is fresh. The title rippled through the crowd before it fully registered with Grant. Mr. Carter, not suspect, not subject, not you people. Grant's face drained of color as understanding finally clawed its way past denial. Mayor, he whispered, the word cracking as if it didn't belong in his mouth. The governor emerged from behind her security detail, eyes locked on Elijah, her presence pressing weight onto the moment without a single word. For the record, the police chief said, voice steady and formal, state your name and position. Elijah straightened as much as the cuffs allowed, dignity rising where force had tried to press it flat. My name is Elijah Carter, he said. I am the mayor of this city. No emphasis, no triumph, just truth. The effect was devastating. Grant's posture collapsed inward, confidence evaporating as his mind raced through consequences, internal affairs, suspension, the footage he could no longer outrun. The crowd murmured, anger mixing with vindication, the story already rewriting itself in real time across social feeds. The chief stepped forward and removed the handcuffs himself, handling them carefully, not like tools, but like proof. Red marks ringed Elijah's wrists, thin lines of pain that cameras zoomed in on without mercy. Elijah flexed his fingers once, adjusted his suit jacket, and met the chief's eyes. I accept your apology, he said quietly when it came, but this isn't about me. He turned deliberately toward the people recording. What happened here today is exactly why we fought for body cameras, civilian oversight, and independent review. The system only works if it works for everyone. Grant tried to speak, tried to explain, but the chief cut him off. Anything you say can be said here, he reminded him, making transparency a blade. The governor placed a hand briefly on Elijah's shoulder. Our meeting can wait, she murmured. This can't. Elijah nodded. He understood the gravity of the moment, not just the personal violation, but the opportunity carved out of it. This wasn't about revenge, it was about exposure. As the news vans rolled closer and reporters set up shots, Elijah watched Grant shrink under the weight of his own words, replayed back at him by reality. Every assumption, every escalation, every unnecessary notch on the cuffs had been documented. Elijah didn't need to raise his voice. The record would do that for him. He glanced once more at the crowd, at the phones still held high, and knew this story would travel far beyond Cedar Avenue. It would land in living rooms, courtrooms, and training manuals, and when it did, the question wouldn't be who Elijah Carter was. The question would be how many others never got to be. The footage went live before the sirens had even faded. By nightfall, the video of Mayor Elijah Carter pinned to a police cruiser had fractured the city into arguments, confessions, and memories people thought they'd buried. News anchors tried to sound neutral and failed. Pundits debated context while freezing on the red marks around Elijah's wrists as if pain were an abstract concept. In barbershops and break rooms, people recognized the look on his face, the calculation, the restraint, the quiet understanding that escalation was never a two-way street. For some, the revelation that he was the mayor changed everything. For others, it changed nothing at all. They'd been saying this was possible. Now it was undeniable. Elijah didn't do the victory lap many expected. He went home, iced his wrists, and sat at the kitchen table long after the house had gone quiet. He replayed the moment the cuffs tightened, the way his breath had shortened, the old lessons returning without being invited. Speak calmly, don't argue, survive the encounter. He thought about the intern who'd called for help, about Officer Rivera loosening the cuffs when no one was watching, about Grant Hollis choosing certainty over curiosity. He knew the city would want a speech, a statement sharpened for headlines. He also knew this moment demanded something steadier than anger. By morning, the police chief announced an independent investigation. Officer Hollis was placed on administrative leave pending review, his body camera seized, his past stops flagged for audit. The department released a timeline that read like a confession. No probable cause, no lawful basis for detention, a cascade of assumptions masquerading as procedure. The union protested. Talk radio roared. Elijah watched it all with the patience of someone who understood momentum. He convened a press conference not at City Hall, but on Cedar Avenue, the place where the lie had tried to pass itself off as order. He stood at the same spot, suit replaced by a simple jacket, the street alive with reporters and residents shoulder to shoulder. "Yesterday," he began, "I was treated the way too many of our neighbors are treated every day. The only difference is that my name opened doors that stay closed for others." He paused, letting the crowd settle. "This is not about one officer. It's about a system that trains fear faster than it trains judgment." He announced immediate steps: an expansion of de-escalation requirements, mandatory bias interruption training designed and led by community members, and an early warning system to flag patterns before they calcify into tragedy. He named civilian oversight not as a threat, but as a partnership. Applause rose, uneven at first, then steadier, the sound of people recognizing themselves in the plan. Inside the department, the reckoning was quieter and sharper. Supervisors sat with footage they could no longer explain away. Rookie officers saw the consequences of shortcuts, taught as instincts. Officer Rivera gave a statement that didn't make him a hero and didn't excuse the silence he regretted. He said he would do better. Grant Hollis retained counsel and issued a statement that apologized without naming harm, a template already familiar to the city. Internal Affairs interviewed him for hours, walking him through the moment where he chose escalation over inquiry, asking him to justify the words that cameras had preserved without malice or mercy. Weeks passed. The investigation concluded with findings that read like a mirror held too close: violations of policy, unlawful detention, conduct unbecoming. The discipline was severe and public. Training protocols were rewritten with timelines attached, budgets reallocated with teeth. Some called it overcorrection. Elijah called it overdue. He met with families who'd filed complaints and never received calls back. He listened more than he spoke. He carried the weight of being believed because of who he was, and he didn't pretend it wasn't heavy. The city changed in small ways first. Officers slowed down. Questions replaced commands in places they never had before. Body cameras stopped being talismans and started being tools. The Oversight Board released quarterly reports that named progress and gaps with equal honesty. Not every stop improved. Not every encounter ended well. But the language shifted. Accountability became something you could point to, not just promise. On the anniversary of the stop, Elijah returned to Cedar Avenue with a small group. No cameras, no speeches. They placed a plaque near the curb, simple and unadorned. "Accountability begins where assumptions end." He stood there for a moment, hands loose at his sides, wrists unmarked now but memory intact. He thought about power, not as insulation, but as responsibility. About how close the city had come to filing this moment away as another misunderstanding. About how easily it could have gone differently if not for witnesses, for documentation, for a system forced to see itself. The story didn't end with redemption arcs or tidy conclusions. It ended with work, with meetings and metrics, with arguments that stayed in the room until something useful came out. It ended with a city learning, slowly and unevenly, that justice isn't a feeling you declare, but a practice you measure. And every time a siren cut the air on Cedar Avenue after that, people remembered the day the truth refused to move and asked out loud for it to stay.